A blonde with 2 red ears went to her doctor. The doctor asked her what had happened to her ears, and she answered, "I was ironing a shirt, and the phone rang. But instead of picking up the phone, I accidentally picked up the iron and stuck it to my ear." "Oh dear," the doctor exclaimed in disbelief. "But what happened to your other ear?" The jerk called back. 3 old men were sitting around and talking. The 80-year-old said, "The best thing that could happen to me would just be to be able to have a good pee. I stand there for 20 minutes, and it dribbles and hurts. I have to go over and over again." The 85-year-old said, "The best thing that could happen to me is if I could have one good bowel movement. I take every kind of laxative I can get my hands on, and it's still a problem." Then the 90-year-old said, "That's not my problem. Every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, I have a good long pee. At around 6:30 a.m., I have a great bowel movement. The best thing that could happen to me would be if I could wake up before 7 a.m. A lawyer was cross-examining the doctor about whether or not he had checked the pulse of the deceased before he signed the death certificate. "No," the doctor said. "I did not check his pulse." "And did you listen for a heartbeat?" asked the lawyer. "No, I did not," the doctor said. "So," said the lawyer, "when you signed the death certificate, you had not taken steps to make sure he was dead." The doctor said, "Well, let me put it this way. The man's brain was in a jar on my desk, but for all I know, he could be out practicing law somewhere." 2 rednecks went to see a counselor about college. They thought they should go to college to get ahead. The first goes in to see the counselor, who tells him to take math, history, and logic. "What's logic?" the first redneck asks. The professor answers by saying, "Let me give you an example. Do you own a weed eater?" "I sure do." "Then I can assume, using logic, that you have a yard," replied the professor. "That's really good," says the redneck. The professor continues, "Logic will also tell me that since you have a yard, you also own a house." Impressed, the redneck says, "Amazing. And since you own a house, logic dictates that you have a wife." "That's Betty May. This is incredible." The redneck is obviously catching on. "Finally, since you have a wife, logically I can assume that you are heterosexual," said the professor. "You're absolutely right. Why, that's the most fascinating thing I ever heard. I can't wait to take that logic class." The redneck, proud of the new world opening up to him, walks back into the hallway, where his friend is still waiting. "So what classes are you taking?" asked the friend. "See more. Math, history, and logic," replies the first redneck. "What in tarnation is logic?" asked his friend. "Let me give you an example. Do you own a weed eater?" asked the first redneck. "No," his friend replied. "So you like guys, don't you?" A delightful, angelic little boy, Johnny, was waiting for his mom outside the ladies' room of the gas station. A man approached him and asked, "Sonny, can you tell me where the post office is?" The little Johnny cheerily replied, "Sure, mister. Just go down this street 2 blocks and turn left. It's on the right. You can't miss it." The man thanked the boy kindly, complimented him on how bright he was, and said, "I'm a new pastor in town. If you and your mommy come to church on Sunday, I'll show you how to get to heaven." The little Johnny replied with a chuckle, "You're shitting me, right? You can't even find the post office." A man started his own small business, and after a few months, things were going well enough that he hired 2 employees, Sarah and Jack. They were both excellent workers, and for a while, everything ran smoothly. But after about a year, sales started to slow down. The business owner realized he could no longer afford both employees and would have to let one of them go. The problem was he had no idea who to choose. Both Sarah and Jack were equally reliable, equally hardworking, and equally valuable to the company. Stress eating away at him, he asked a friend for advice. The friend thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow, just watch them closely. Fire the first one who takes a break during the day." The next morning, the owner followed the plan carefully. Sarah seemed a bit off. She was rubbing her temples, clearly dealing with a headache. After a while, she stood up, walked to the cabinet, and took some aspirin. The owner immediately saw it as a break. "This is it," he thought. "That's the rule." Feeling terrible but determined, he walked over to her. "Sarah," he said, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to lay you or Jack off." "Sarah, clearly annoyed and still holding her head, looked at him and replied, "Can you jack off? I got a headache." Three guys were sitting at a bar after work, relaxing with a few drinks. Suddenly, the first guy's phone rang. He answered, listened for 2 seconds, then jumped off his stool in a panic. "Oh no," he muttered, throwing money on the bar. "I forgot to do the dishes and my wife's almost home." Then he ran out the door. The second guy laughed and shook his head. "Can you believe that? Around my house, I call the shots." He stood up, pulled out his wallet, and added proudly, "When I get home, all I have to do is clap my hands twice, and my wife brings me hot water immediately." The bartender looked impressed. The man sighed and headed for the door. "Yeah, I hate washing dishes with cold water." Meanwhile, the third guy just sat there calmly, sipping his drink with a satisfied smile. The bartender leaned over and said, "You seem different. I guess you're the real master of your house." The third guy smiled. "I don't like to brag, but the last time I spoke to my wife, she was on her knees. On all fours, actually." The bartender's eyes widened. "Really? What did she say?" The man took another sip and replied, "She said, 'If you're really a man, come out from under the bed.'" A blonde had just been in a terrible car accident. Somehow, she climbed out of the wreck without a single scratch and was calmly applying fresh lipstick when the state trooper pulled up. The officer stared at the crumpled mess of metal and said, "Ma'am, your car looks like it got flattened by an elephant. Are you sure you're all right?" The blonde smiled and replied, "Oh, I'm perfectly fine, officer." Still puzzled, the trooper asked, "So, what exactly happened here?" The blonde explained, "Well, officer, it was the weirdest thing. I was just driving along when out of nowhere, this tree jumped right in front of me. So I swerved to miss it, but another tree popped up on the other side. I swerved again, and there was another tree, then another, and another." The officer paused for a moment, then said, "Ma'am, there isn't a single tree on this road for at least 30 miles. That was your air freshener swinging back and forth." A blonde was taking a taxi to the airport when traffic suddenly came to a complete standstill. Cars weren't moving an inch. The driver sighed dramatically, leaned back in his seat, and said, "Well, looks like we'll be here a while. Want to hear a riddle?" The blonde smiled. "Sure." The driver cleared his throat proudly. "Okay, who is my mother's child and my father's child, but is neither my brother nor my sister?" The blonde thought hard for nearly a minute. Finally, she groaned, "I give up." "Who?" The driver grinned. "Me." The blonde burst out laughing. "Oh my gosh, that's actually clever." For the rest of the ride, she kept repeating the riddle quietly to herself so she wouldn't forget it. By the time she landed back home that evening, she was excited to impress her husband with the brilliant riddle she had learned. The second he walked through the door, she smiled proudly and said, "Hey, listen to this. Who is my mother's child and my father's child, but is neither my brother nor my sister?" Her husband thought for a moment. "I don't know." "Who?" The blonde crossed her arms triumphantly and said, "My taxi driver." Her husband stared at her silently for 3 full seconds. Then he sighed and muttered, "You really should travel less."